Thank you for joining the Persistence Mastery Podcast, hosted by Leon Solutions, a training company that helps to realign teams and their communication skills to help the team you have in place conquer more throughout the workday. This will be hosted by me, Paul Leon, and thank you for listening to the Persistence Mastery Podcast. Welcome to episode 5 of the Persistence Mastery Podcast on Be Resilient. This episode is going to be different. It's the first time I've ever had someone outside of myself speak on this subject matter. And if you didn't get a chance to read the bio, you're going to be hearing from Miguel Nava, a 20-year seasoned human resource and customer service professional. This authentic story and lessons you'll hear about this subject, you can apply immediately post listening. You know, as somebody who has worked with over 2,000 people just this year alone, I can tell you I can count on one hand the people that I can ask to speak to on the subject. And I can't think of anyone better than Miguel Nava. And with that, I'll let him take it from here to speak on Be Resilient. Thanks again, Danny, for doing episode 5 on Be Resilient. I've known you how long now, would you say?
About 30 years.
30 years. And, this is interesting because I've never had anyone do this type of podcast. I've never had an interview. This is my first time. And I just want to say straight up, thank you for doing this for me. And your story is very compelling. And I don't want to take anything away from it because it's your voice. And I don't want to take that away from you. So this is on Be Resilient. And, for those listening, speak to what that means from your perspective.
For me, it's more about overall patience. Patience is easier said than just being done. For me, it was been more about planning and remembering things are only temporary in the moment, no matter what the situation may be. If it's something with work, with family, personal life, business life, but planning, understanding, and really being patient overall helps. The first two help with the patience overall.
Okay. You mentioned patience, a healthy amount there. So help me out to understand like time where you talk about planning, understand this is temporary, patience. Give me a little bit more when you say those lessons, because I think we can say that and people will listen. They'll say, well, I get that. That's true. But speak to like you personally or you have professionally, anytime you want to pick out of your life where these principles really resonated large for you.
Well, I can tell you a recent story back in September of 2022. There was a hurricane, category 3, I believe, Hurricane Ian that hit Cuba, most of Florida, and some other states. But I was currently living at the time in Central Florida in the Kissimmee area. The home I was in actually got flooded up to about waist deep. Certain parts of Kissimmee was lower than other parts, but where I was living, the house got flooded. It was up to about waist deep. It's pretty bad, that alone. At the time, I had just started caregiving for my sister, who was diagnosed with dementia. And I'm also a pet parent, so I had a large dog as well I was taking care of. But basically, I would say that, because of the water being so high, vehicles couldn't get through. I knew it mainly because my vehicle's halfway underwater. I was also concerned about my sister and my dog, even wondering also. It was hard for us to even imagine leaving our home. But we couldn't leave, and we had to stay there for a few days until the water started to go down a little day by day. But finally, I would say after 3 days, water started to go down. I had to reach out to family who, closest living family I had was in South Florida. 2 of my nieces actually offered to come up and pick us up.
Really?
Yeah. So
you say waist deep, like, so I'm about 5'9", 5'10". I'm not very tall. Like, would you say like you're looking at me now because we're recording this in the studio, like to my belt buckle, like how far are we talking when you say look at the water when you first walked into the place when it all was happening? Now the time has passed.
about up to your belt buckle.
Really?
Yeah, it was certain parts were probably a little lower than that, but on average, it's overall up to your belt buckle.
Wow. So you walk in, you're home. Did you have to evacuate? You didn't have time to grab anything either, if imagine.
Yeah, we shortly have to evacuate. After maybe 2 or 3 days, they had some people going out with boats to help pick up, but take to shelters that didn't allow animals. They were shelters just for people, and unfortunately, again, the shelter for me and someone who has dementia was not good. But also because I had a large dog, that was still bad. So we were only there maybe for 3 days. It was still pretty waist high. So yeah, fortunately, we had to sleep in that. But um, like I said, the closest family I had was living in South Florida. So two of my nieces came and picked us up. We had to relocate for the time being in South Florida. Um, and that was only meant to be temporarily, but shortly after that, I reached out to FEMA, found out that FEMA only gives to homeowners, not to anyone who was living there, because I was renting the house at the time. And then after talking with the homeowner, they weren't offering any FEMA assistance to me themselves. They didn't even want to renew their lease with me, so I had no home to return to.
Wait, well, really? So
Yes.
the people who were renting the place didn't even give you an option to come back at that time either. So that had followed this event that was completely out of your control.
Yeah, and that second part actually didn't homeowner didn't mention to me until about 4 months after the hurricane already hit. So
Okay.
months after I had gone by, I've been staying with family. I couldn't stay with them anymore without jeopardizing or violating their leases with where they were staying. So I had to find a home somewhere somehow. I knew that would take some time. So eventually, I realized getting a car would probably be a little quicker to live out of. Had to kind of learn and DIY myself. A lot of people I found out during that time were, I think they call it car living or van life. So that's unfortunately what I had to do at the time. So I bought a car, started parking like Walmart and hotel parking lots to sleep at night with, again, with my sister with dementia, my largest dog. Thankfully, though, I do work remote and I was able to work out of my car during this whole time. A few days out of the week, I was able to stay at a family member's house here and there, which allowed us to, do the necessities and shower and things like that. But during this time, I spent more time realizing that I had to kind of go back and forth a lot, spending more money getting stuff out of my old house, sorting through stuff that already, I would say, got moldy. But even saving some stuff in storage, taking some trips to move stuff out of storage, that just added up more cost. So I was finally able to find a small apartment where I currently reside in Hollywood, Florida, in the South Florida area, but slowly getting back to a normal routine.
You know what blows my mind personally is the fact that you, you glazed over the fact that you lost your home and had to live in a vehicle. And you said that just like it was no big deal. And I'm not trying to I don't want to open up any pain for you in any way, shape, or form. But what blows my mind personally is, I travel, I meet a lot of people, and I hear a lot of complaints like, I didn't get my order in time, or I didn't get a call an hour later, or why didn't someone call me the next day? Little customer service things like that. And I'm not saying those people in those moments don't have a right to be mad or sad or glad, but you went through like from my perspective, I professionally feel like I'm a pretty mentally tough person, but I don't know how I would handle that. And you seem very content. The fact that you did what you had to do, and what's even more amazing is that you never lost your job during that whole time, if I recall. Thankfully you were remote, which speaks a lot to remote work, in my opinion, outside of this episode. But you never lost your job. Is that correct?
Yeah, very few people actually knew what I was going through. You being one of them, since we've known each other for so long, and only other person outside of my family was probably my manager at work, and he knew my whole situation in great detail. But Even knowing that I was working out of my car at the time, I had to, I believe it's a no show. I don't know if a lot of people will get this, but reference, but MacGyver, kind of a car battery
Yeah.
to a to like some clamps and connect it to a it's kind of like a cigarette lighter thing, and connect that to being able to plug up my laptop in my car,
Oh,
and even
really?
having like a wireless hotspot with allow me to connect my work laptop to it. So yeah, I was working out of my car 8 9 hours out of the day, and unfortunately eating a lot of fast food during my lunch breaks, and just going somewhere to wash up at a gas station afterwards. And not just me. Again, I was taking care of my sister, who's I think 54, 55, unfortunately, with dementia at an early age, but taking care of me and her, and then again trying to find some place at night for us to park safely at night. So I mean, again, that was a struggle. I mean, I'm not trying to sugarcoat in any way, but that's where a lot of my remembering to plan every day, came into to help, and knowing that this was just temporary, and knowing that those two things helped me remember to stay patient, because outside of the few people who knew, no one would be able to tell what I was going through.
I think you've always been a pretty good planner. I know growing up, one of the things I was always jealous of you of is the fact that you always could put everything, you could make small spaces bigger. That was one thing I always admired about you. Like you could make something small and functional and working. And what's crazy to me is that there are other people when you were having to do this that that I think you saw that also slept in their car. It wasn't just you, if I recall, right?
Yeah, so that was fun. One thing I found that was kind of interesting community. I did, like I said, look up at the time, and this was still around late 2022,
Right?
that I did start finding a lot of people parking in these parking lots, Walmart parking lots. And there were some campsites, that you can pay 10, $20 for the night, and park it as well.
Yeah.
But there was tons of people there living out of their vehicles. And I had a mini SUV, and people living out of vans, people living out of small cars. So I mean, some people had it, I would say, more rough than me. I've saw people living out on the street in the same parking lot. So I mean, without a vehicle. So I mean, I would consider myself in that aspect fortunate because I had a vehicle. But even remembering that there were people who were even less fortunate than I was.
Right. That is something you don't think about. That when you're going through tough times, somebody else does always have it tougher. But I don't know. Like for me, still, you know what I want to ask you about? You admitted now that you're in a better place. Speak a little bit about where you're at now, outside of going through that hurricane, losing everything, having to sleep in your car for many nights. Talk about where you're at now, because I think for me, that's the part that's most amazing, personally. If you don't mind speaking to that a little, and then I'm going to go back to that after you answer this question. So, where are you at now after sleeping in your car, going through all that? Talk to me about what you managed to overcome, because now I know the story, but those who don't.
Well, funny enough, for a week prior to having this review or conversation, I actually had a one-on-one review with my job, as most companies do annual reviews with employees, and um, I actually got a lot of exceeding expectations and meeting expectations, and my company doesn't do major pay increases, but I got a 3% pay increase, and my manager even commented that it was still amazing with everything that I still went through, that I was still able to get through, everything work wise, So, I mean, that to me, I've gotten a lot of praise from him. He shared a little with my director of my, company. And again, they're just amazed that I was able to do all that. Again, they didn't know a lot of the details of it, but work wise, I mean, things are good. I mean, I'm able to have more peace of mind now where I work. And again, not having to worry about where I'm going to park to work. I'm in an apartment, and I will say this: unfortunately, South Florida is a horrible place to live, only because it's very costly. But
Yeah.
everyone's suffering right now from the raising living expenses and stuff. But yeah, I have a small place. I'm able to have enough space for me and my sister and my dog, and was able to really deep dive and get really actively involved in my sister's insurance, which I advise a lot of people to do because there's a lot that insurance companies don't tell you about.
Right.
But I was able to get an aide to come in and help get her set up with daycare. So now I have some normality in my day. She has normality in her day. She feels like she has a life now, not just constantly being dragged from one place to another. So no, I mean it's normal to me where I now have I'm able to get up and send her off to daycare, an adult daycare, and be able to work most of the day. Then the rest of the day, I have an aide come in to tend to her, and I can still finish off working my work day and then be able to cook dinner and have a relationship with my sister. And that's another thing I would say, being a caregiver, a lot of patience in that as well. Um,
For sure.
because you start feeling like you're managing someone's health and not really losing that relationship with someone. So my sister, who I'm caregiving now, has always been like the one person who's always kind of really been the sibling that's always been there. So sadly for me that's now happening with her, but I started kind of resenting the fact a little. I will admit that it felt like I was just managing her health and
Yeah.
kind of losing that relationship with her. So I'm mentally back at that point where now I feel like I have a relationship with her. Even her caregiver, or not her caregiver, her aide, told me a few weeks ago she now notices that it seems like I'm happier now when she
Yeah.
comes over to visit. So it's little things that I didn't realize about myself, but it was affecting me even in that aspect of being a caregiver. So I'm talking about losing a home and the flood and how it affected work and everything, but I was also caring for an adult at this time. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean it's good. Like I said, I have a place. Work is good. My friends have been there a little bit more, I would say, than my family, especially you. A lot of, I would say, emotional and mental leadership and guidance from you, and just a few. God, same as you. I can only say one or two people in my life has kind of been a good guiding point as well. But um, it's just been a lot of planning, just knowing, like I said, again, this was all only temporary because I didn't want this to be my forever story.
I think that you make a good point there. You didn't want this to be your forever story. So I'm gonna go back a little. So you're now in a place. You're still working the same company. You never managed for your work. You exceeded expectations,
Mhm.
which is my hat's off to you. I'm thankful to be a part of the journey, to be there with you. I wasn't in the car with you, but to like be there as your friend. Let me ask you this, because we were out last night, getting some dinner, having a good time, and it was really nice to do that with you. But I remember we drove by a parking lot, and you said, I used to sleep in parking lots like that. You were just pretty candid about it. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, like it was no big deal. Let
Yeah.
me ask you this. When you're driving around Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, Florida, that whole area, you told me you still see those parking lots. When you drive past that now, what's your perspective when you see someone sleep in their car before you went through this, if I may ask? Was it different? Did it change now? Speak to that a little. I don't mean to catch you off guard, but I'm just curious from my perspective.
I see it now as a reminder that I never want that to happen again. I mean, a lot of things in life can be out of our control. And if I had to do it all again, I mean, I, I don't think I would change much of what I've done because where I was staying at the time was what I felt was the safe place. And only, I guess, again, because I saw a community of other people struggling the same as well. Um, but I see them now as really a reminder that I just never want to get back to that point. I mean, it was out of my control with the hurricane. That's kind of what domino affected everything. But yeah, I mean, just it's a reminder. I think we always need to have daily reminders of what we want our goals to be and what we don't want in our lives, and really important to make sure we keep those unwanted things out and do what we can to avoid those.
You also take care of your sister, and you were doing that the entire time. And from my perspective, because she has dementia and it's hard to remember things, a lot of the times I can imagine, and it can feel, I don't know, from me, if I was in that shoes, I would think this can sometimes feel thankless. How do you speak to somebody who's going through something, who's like, I feel not appreciated in my work, like whatever? Okay. How do you speak to that person and say, even though you're in a thankless situation, here's why you're actually not? Can you speak on that a little? Because what you're doing is pretty epic from my perspective. Taking care of your sister, go overcoming a catastrophic event like that, having your and you still took care of her. You still are today. You've managed to get her aid. She has support. She has loved ones around her. You did all that, black and white. Nobody did that. You did that. You were a part of it. There was some support from your family, but you were the catalyst. Speak to somebody who's in a thankless situation and say, here's why it's not thankless. Remember this.
Um, I guess really the golden rule. Most people may think this is corny, but just do unto others. I mean, I just one I could say yes because she's family, but at the other hand, it just feels like this is someone that partially I would say raised me, but just knowing that if I was in that situation, I would hope someone in my family would step up and take care of me as I took care of her. And that's just, you could say it was how I was raised. You can say my belief system, just overall, just not to sound religious in any way, but just I always felt you should treat others the way you honestly want to be treated. And if you don't have anything positive in a way to say or how to treat someone, then just avoid it. If you have an issue with someone, just avoid that person. But to me, it was just that it does become, as you said, thankless. It becomes like you feel unappreciated. Um, yeah, there's been probably one or two moments where I felt like, why am I having to go through all this? But it came back again to my thought process and trying to remember. And even in I would say, the darkest moments when I felt I couldn't even motivate myself, still reaching out to really the few positive people in your life. So, I mean, that was, like I said, you and maybe one other person I could think of. But that's that's it. I mean, just treating others right.
Treating others right. It's common sense, but common sense is not always common. Isn't that crazy? Like you hear that sentence and it's just, there's a lot of wisdom in it. So, for what it's worth, I'm thankful for you. And I'm thankful that there are people like you. I think you remind me, myself personally, of why I do what I do and why I can overcome. Because you can overcome something like that, and any one of us, in fact, I don't think there's a lot of people that can relate to this story, can overcome much. So I really want you to be the last thing in this episode. I want you to be the last voice that this episode resonates with. So, what would you say the call to action is over being resilient? You've told your story, you've told a lot of points. I think you've told more than I could have asked for you doing this for me. So, I appreciate that. But speak to the call to action or actions on how to be resilient going forward as we wrap up this episode.
Um, I'll give an explanation for everything, but I would say planning, understanding, and those two to me lead to patience. For me, I felt that as long as I was planning for tomorrow, for the week, or for the month, I was moving forward, and I wasn't really staying still. So that was a big part of always, as you said, always who I've been, growing up. So I mean, understanding for me, understanding that I was only going to be temporarily living in this car. The hurricane had already came by, and I lost my home, and things could get worse, but they can only also get better. And I think a funny thing you told me once was from some other great person that if you can look up, you can get up.
It was Les Brown, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I felt. I mean, understand that this was only for the moment. Yeah, it lasted a few months, but again, knowing that it was only temporary. I knew that was something I had to kind of, I guess, as a mantra or prayer or whatever you want to call it, a daily affirmation.
Yeah.
But I just had to remind myself that every day that today was only for now, and that helped me stay positive. That this was only going to be, not my forever situation again.
Not
So
my forever situation.
yeah,
So planning, understanding this is temporary, and those two things will lead to more patience.
yeah. To me, the patience, Those, like I said, those first 2 points, patience, planning, and understanding, because those two really help my patience, which kind of trickled into my relationships with family and with friends. And I guess I could have been more of a Debbie Downer or more of a depressed, negative minded person through all this. But like I said, a lot of people didn't know. My family thought I was handling it well. People at work were only, again, my manager only knew. And he kept telling me monthly at least, that he was still surprised how positive I was staying. I do interviews for school, daily. I speak with at least 20 to 50 students a day. And these are like 30-minute hour calls. And you can never tell on the calls I was doing with students when I had one-on-ones with my manager, with other team members. No one could tell what I was going through based on my facial and my tone. Just, I was very active in a
Yeah,
lot of other things going on. So, I mean, like I said, it trickles into my work relationships, my family friend relationships. So that's what I would have to say is just, for me, was planning and understanding. And those two lead to having patience.
good. I think those are the wise words to stand on. When you work on your planning, understanding this is temporary, you'll have more patience. And I think it's good to know that. It's good to have that knowledge. But when you apply it, that's when real wisdom comes in at the end of the day. So thank you for doing this. I know taking time out of our busy days is hard, and I'm thankful for you. And I appreciate you.
Thank you.